When I saw on my monitor screen what the drone had captured that night, my heart stopped beating for several seconds. But let me start from the beginning. The last 3 months of my life had turned into some kind of strange nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. It all began quite unexpectedly when our life in Boston seemed perfect. Roxana and I had lived together for 5 years, and we had a wonderful son Ethan who had just turned 3. I'm Roger, a former video editor. Former because for the last 6 months I'd been unemployed after the studio where I worked went bankrupt. Roxana worked as a blogger-streamer, and her lifestyle and travel channel brought in decent money. She became the sole breadwinner of the family, and I honestly tried to find a new job while taking care of our son while she worked. Everything changed when a new neighbor moved into the apartment next to ours. Max was a young startup entrepreneur who had just moved to Boston to develop his technology business. Tall, confident, with that energy of success that I had lost along with my job. Roxana met him in the elevator and he seemed like a pleasant guy. We even had dinner together a few times. But then something changed. Roxana started staying late after streams, saying she needed more time for editing, for communicating with advertisers. She would disappear for entire evenings, then for nights, saying she was going to shoot content or attending networking events. I believed her because she really did work a lot and her channel was growing. The first alarm bell rang when I accidentally saw a message on her phone. She had left it on the kitchen table and I simply glanced at the screen when it lit up. "Can't wait for next time," from Max. My heart clenched, but I told myself it could be about anything. Maybe he was consulting her on business. The following weeks I became more attentive. I noticed little things. How she smiled when checking her phone. How she rushed to the shower immediately after coming home. How she emotionally distanced herself from me. But the worst part, how she started making excuses for every minute of delay with some nervous energy. That's when I decided to use my skills. I'm an editor, I know technology. And I had a drone, a professional one with a good camera that I'd bought before being laid off from my projects. One time, when Roxana said she was going to a camping site outside the city for a night photo shoot for her channel, I decided to check. I installed special tracking software, waited an hour after her departure, and launched the drone in the direction where the camping site was located. My hands trembled as I piloted it through the darkness, using infrared vision. And then I saw them. Near a small campfire. Roxana and Max. They were sitting too close. Too intimately. I made a recording, though every second of video tore my heart to pieces. But I knew I needed evidence. All the evidence I could gather. The next 2 weeks I continued to monitor. The drone became my silent witness. I filmed how they met by his car. How they entered his apartment together when I was supposedly walking with my son in the park. How they came out a few hours later. Each video I carefully saved, creating a chronology of their betrayal. But the biggest shock awaited me a month later. Roxana informed me that she was pregnant. She was glowing with happiness, hugging me, saying it was a miracle that our family was growing. I smiled, but inside everything went cold. We hadn't made love in 3 months. She was always busy, tired, not in the mood. I quickly calculated the timing. Everything coincided with the beginning of her delays at work. The child couldn't be mine. And then I understood, the matter had become much more serious. It was at this moment that I began to develop a plan. Not just a plan for exposure, a plan for revenge. That revenge which would return everything I had lost and make them both regret every minute of their betrayal. The first thing I did was check our finances. Roxana controlled all the money because she was the only one earning. But she didn't know one thing. A few years ago, when I was still earning well, I had invested part of my money in cryptocurrency. In a separate cold wallet that she didn't know about. It was about $70,000, which over these years had grown to almost $200,000. I quietly withdrew this money through various exchanges, transferred it to a new bank account opened in the name of my old friend who agreed to help me. This money became my safety cushion, my insurance policy for the future. Next, I contacted a lawyer. I showed him all the videos from the drone, all the evidence of betrayal. He was impressed by the volume of material collected. We began preparing divorce documents, but I asked him to wait. I wanted the blow to be as precise and painful as possible. Meanwhile, Roxana continued to play the role of a loving wife. Her belly was already starting to round out. She talked about the future, about how wonderful it would be to have 2 children. Max continued to be the nice neighbor, who occasionally stopped by, just to say hello. Their double game evoked in me both pain and rage simultaneously. But the most interesting part began when I accidentally overheard their conversation. Roxana called Max while standing on the balcony, not knowing that I had quietly approached the open balcony door. She was crying. She said she loved him but also loved me. That she didn't know what to do. That the child was theirs but she couldn't leave the family. That Ethan needed a father. Max in response said that he also loved her, that he wanted her to be with him, that he was ready to raise both children. But in his voice I heard doubt. The same doubt that creeps in when fantasy collides with reality. I recorded this conversation too. It became the final detail of my plan. The day came when Roxana was supposed to meet with relatives to announce the pregnancy. A big family dinner to which her parents, brother, and my mother were invited. Everyone gathered in our apartment. The atmosphere was festive. Roxana stood up with a glass of juice and began her speech about how happy she was, how she loved our family, how she was expecting an addition. Everyone applauded, smiled, congratulated us. And then I asked for the floor. Everyone looked at me in surprise. Usually I didn't like being the center of attention. But this time it was different. I also want to make an announcement, I began calmly. Roxana is indeed pregnant. But I want everyone to know the truth about this child. Roxana's face went pale. She understood something was wrong. I turned on the TV and started the video I had edited. All those recordings from the drone, all their meetings chronologically arranged with dates and times. The camping, his apartment, their embraces by the car. Everything was filmed clearly without possibility of denial. The room froze in absolute silence. The only sound was from the video footage where their voices, their laughter could be heard. Then came the recording of the phone conversation where Roxana admitted that the child was Max's. Roxana's mother burst into tears. Her father stood up with such fury on his face that I even got scared for a moment. My own mother just looked at Roxana with undisguised disappointment. Roxana was hysterical, begging, trying to explain something, but words were lost in sobs. She rushed to me, grabbed my hands, asked for forgiveness, said it was a mistake, that she loved me. Maybe you really do love me, I said coldly. But that's not enough. You destroyed our family. And now everyone knows the truth. The next morning I filed for divorce. My lawyer was brilliant. Thanks to all the evidence collected, thanks to the fact that the child wasn't mine, thanks to the fact that I was unemployed and dependent on Roxana financially, which paradoxically played in my favor, the court ruled that the apartment, which was registered to both of us, would go to me. Roxana had to pay me compensation for moral damages and provide for Ethan's upkeep, who stayed with me. But the most interesting thing happened after the divorce. Roxana went to Max, full of hope that now they would finally be together. But reality turned out to be cruel. Max wasn't ready to instantly become a father of 2 children, her son from me and their future child. A romantic secret meeting is one thing, but real life with all its problems is quite another. They lived together for 3 months. Roxana gave birth to a girl. But their relationship began to crack under the weight of reality. Constant quarrels, mutual claims, disappointment. Max wasn't ready for such responsibility, and Roxana couldn't come to terms with the fact that she had lost a stable life for something so unstable. But here's something happened that no one expected. Somewhere in the 4th month of their life together, something changed. Max suddenly completely rethought his priorities. Maybe it was the child, maybe it was the realization that he had almost lost everything. He sold part of his business, reduced his work schedule, and began to completely devote himself to the family. Roxana in turn closed her blog. She realized that public life and family happiness were incompatible for her. They moved to a small town outside Boston where no one knew them and started everything from scratch. I learned about this from mutual acquaintances. And oddly enough, I didn't feel joy from their previous suffering. I felt relief. Relief that my daughter, yes, I still consider Ethan my son and he stays with me, would have a stable family. Even if it's not our family. As for me, that money from cryptocurrency became the foundation for my new life. I opened my own video production studio that specializes in creating content for social networks. Irony of fate, I used the skills acquired while tracking my wife to build a successful business. Ethan is growing up as a happy child. He sees his mother once every 2 weeks, and I never try to turn him against her. He has the right to love both parents regardless of their mistakes. Sometimes, late in the evening when Ethan is asleep, I sit on that same balcony where I once overheard Roxana's conversation. I look at the lights of Boston and think about how thin the line is between love and betrayal, between revenge and justice. Roxana destroyed our life. But from the fragments of that life I built something new. Something stronger. Something real. And the drone that helped me learn the truth still stands in my studio. A reminder that sometimes the hardest thing is not to learn the truth, but to find the strength within yourself to accept it and move on. 2 years have passed. My business is thriving, Ethan is going to school, and I've even started dating a wonderful woman named Emily who works as a teacher. We're not rushing, building a relationship slowly on a foundation of trust and honesty. Roxana and Max are still together. They're raising their daughter, and rumor has it they're even planning to get married. Life has put everything in its place, though not the way any of us expected. And most importantly, I understood one simple truth. Revenge is not always about destroying another person's life. Sometimes the best revenge is building your own happiness on the ruins of the past and showing that you're stronger than it seemed. But let me tell you more about how everything unfolded, because the story doesn't end here. The details of what happened during those months of investigation, the preparation for the confrontation, and the aftermath deserve to be told in full. When I first started using the drone for surveillance, I felt like a character in some spy movie. The technology was sophisticated enough that I could track them from significant distances without being detected. The drone had a range of several miles and could operate in near silence at higher altitudes. I learned to time my flights perfectly, always ensuring I was tracking Roxana's location through the Find My Friends app we had set up years ago for safety reasons. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very tool meant to keep us connected became the instrument of discovering her betrayal. The camping trip wasn't their first rendezvous. Through careful observation, I discovered they had been meeting regularly for at least 2 months before I started my surveillance. The camping site was just one of their spots. They also met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood far from our usual haunts, at a boutique hotel downtown that Max sometimes used for business meetings, and of course at his apartment when they thought I was occupied elsewhere. Each location told a story. The coffee shop meetings seemed more emotional, more conflicted. I could see through the drone footage how Roxana would sometimes cry, how Max would comfort her. The hotel visits were obviously romantic, carefully planned to avoid detection. But it was his apartment where they seemed most comfortable, most domestic. I watched them cook together, laugh together, exist in a bubble of intimacy that should have belonged to us. What struck me most during those weeks of observation wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was the emotional connection between them. This wasn't just an affair born of opportunity or momentary weakness. They had built something together, a relationship with depth and meaning. And that realization hurt more than anything else. I became obsessed with collecting evidence. Every video was meticulously cataloged, time-stamped, and backed up in multiple locations. I created a detailed timeline, cross-referencing with Roxana's explanations for where she'd been. The discrepancies were numerous and damning. When she said she was at a business dinner, I had footage of her entering Max's apartment. When she claimed to be filming content at a scenic location, the drone showed her and Max at the hotel. My technical skills as a video editor served me well. I learned to enhance footage, stabilize shaky recordings, and even improve audio quality from the drone's microphone when they were outside. I became proficient in ways I never imagined, driven by a need to know everything, to have irrefutable proof. The pregnancy announcement hit me like a physical blow. Roxana was radiant when she told me, her eyes shining with tears of joy. She held my hands and talked about how this was a new chapter for us, how Ethan would have a sibling, how our family was complete. I played along perfectly, expressing excitement and love, while inside I was calculating the timeline and knowing with absolute certainty that this child couldn't be mine. That night, after Roxana fell asleep, I sat in my home office and reviewed all the footage again. I watched the dates, traced back to when their physical relationship likely began, and confirmed what I already knew. The child was Max's. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was bringing another man's child into our home under the pretense that it was mine. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd experienced before, but I channeled it into planning. I consulted with my lawyer about paternity testing, about how to handle the pregnancy and divorce proceedings, about custody of Ethan. Massachusetts law was actually quite favorable to my situation. The presumption of paternity could be challenged, especially with DNA evidence. And given that I had proof of the affair during the conception period, the court would likely be sympathetic. But I wanted more than just a favorable divorce settlement. I wanted everyone to know what she'd done. I wanted her family to see the truth. I wanted the public exposure to match the private humiliation I'd endured. The cryptocurrency holdings were my ace in the hole. Roxana knew I'd dabbled in crypto years ago, but she thought I'd sold everything during one of the market dips. She had no idea I'd held onto a significant portion in a cold storage wallet. Over the years, as Bitcoin and Ethereum surged, that investment had multiplied. It was money she couldn't claim in the divorce because she didn't know it existed. I systematically moved those assets, converting them through peer-to-peer exchanges and multiple intermediaries to avoid leaving a clear trail. My friend Jake, who I'd known since college, agreed to hold the funds temporarily. He opened an account in his name and I transferred everything there. It wasn't illegal, this was money I'd earned before marriage, but I wanted to ensure Roxana couldn't access it during the divorce proceedings. The planning for the revelation dinner took weeks. I wanted it to be at our home, on what should have been a happy occasion, surrounded by family. The psychological impact would be maximum. I prepared the video presentation carefully, editing together the most damning footage into a chronological story that required no narration. The dates and timestamps spoke for themselves. I ended it with the audio of her phone conversation with Max where she admitted the pregnancy was his. I even prepared a script for myself, rehearsing what I would say, how I would remain calm and in control while their world shattered. This wasn't about losing my temper, it was about methodical, calculated exposure. The dinner itself was surreal. Watching Roxana play the happy expectant mother, seeing Max text her, I could see her phone screen from my angle, knowing that in minutes everything would implode, it gave me a strange sense of power. I'd been powerless for months, watching my wife betray me, unsure of what to do. Now I held all the cards. When I started the video, time seemed to slow down. I watched everyone's faces as comprehension dawned. Roxana's parents, who had always been kind to me, looked devastated. Her brother's expression went from confusion to anger in seconds. My mother, who had loved Roxana like a daughter, simply closed her eyes as if blocking out something too painful to witness. Roxana's reaction was almost theatrical. She screamed, she cried, she begged. She tried to explain that she loved me, that it was a mistake, that she wanted to work things out. But her words rang hollow against the evidence playing on screen. Her mother had to be physically restrained from leaving the apartment in distress. The aftermath was chaotic. Roxana's father demanded I turn off the video. Her brother actually stood up and left without a word. My mother approached me and simply squeezed my shoulder, a gesture of support that meant everything. The dinner, of course, ended immediately. People left in stunned silence. Roxana tried to talk to me that night. She followed me to our bedroom, still crying, still explaining. She said Max meant nothing, that it was just physical, that the pregnancy didn't change how she felt about our family. I let her talk, saying nothing. Then I handed her the divorce papers my lawyer had prepared. She would be served officially in the morning, but I wanted her to see them now. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. With the evidence I provided, Roxana's lawyer advised her not to contest the divorce. We agreed to a separation period where she would move out of the apartment. The paternity test, done after the baby was born, confirmed what everyone already knew. Max was the biological father. The custody battle over Ethan was the hardest part. Roxana wanted joint custody, but my lawyer argued that given her deception and the instability of her current living situation, primary custody should go to me. The judge agreed, granting me primary physical custody with Roxana getting visitation rights every other weekend and one evening per week. The apartment, which we'd purchased together, became mine. Roxana had to buy out her half of the equity, which she did using money from Max. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Her affair partner was essentially paying for my housing. But what happened next surprised everyone, including me. Max and Roxana's relationship, which had seemed so passionate and secret, struggled under the harsh light of reality. Living together with a newborn, dealing with the social fallout, managing the practical aspects of life, it tested them in ways their affair never had. I heard about their struggles through mutual friends. The first months were particularly rough. Roxana was dealing with postpartum depression, guilt over losing Ethan, and the realization that her blogging career was effectively over. Max was overwhelmed by sudden fatherhood and the financial burden of supporting Roxana and the baby while his startup was still in growth phase. They separated briefly around month 3. Roxana even reached out to me, asking if there was any possibility of reconciliation. I declined. The trust was gone, and I'd already begun moving forward with my life. But then something shifted. Max's startup got acquired by a larger tech company. The financial pressure eased. He took parental leave and really invested time in being a father. Roxana got therapy for her depression and started to heal. They went to couples counseling together. Around month 6 they moved out of Boston to a suburb. Away from the judgment, away from the memories, they started rebuilding. And surprisingly, it worked. They built a life together based not on the excitement of an affair but on genuine partnership and commitment. When I heard they were doing well, my first reaction was anger. Why did they get a happy ending after what they'd done? But over time that anger faded. Their happiness didn't diminish mine. And more importantly, their daughter, Ethan's half-sister, deserved to grow up in a stable, loving home. My own life took unexpected turns. The video production studio I started grew rapidly. My experience and skills, combined with the capital from my crypto investments, allowed me to hire talented people and take on bigger clients. Within a year, we were producing content for major brands and had expanded to a second office. Ethan adjusted remarkably well. He was young enough that the changes in family structure didn't traumatize him deeply. He loved spending time with me, and his visits with Roxana were generally positive. She was a good mother despite being an unfaithful wife. I never spoke negatively about her in front of him. Meeting Emily was unexpected. She was the teacher at Ethan's preschool, and we met at a parent-teacher conference. We started talking, discovered common interests, and gradually began dating. She knew my history, everyone in our social circle did, but she didn't judge. She'd been through her own divorce for different reasons. With Emily, I learned to trust again. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. We built our relationship on honesty and communication. When I felt insecure or worried, I talked to her about it instead of surveilling or suspecting. It was healthier, though sometimes harder. The drone still sits in my studio, but now I use it for client work, aerial shots for commercials, event coverage, real estate videos. It's just a tool again, no longer a symbol of betrayal and discovery. 2 years after the divorce, Roxana and Max invited me to a mediation session with a family therapist. They wanted to discuss co-parenting, about Ethan potentially spending more time with them and building a relationship with his half-sister. It was awkward at first, sitting across from them, but we managed to have a productive conversation. Roxana apologized again, more genuinely this time, without the hysteria of that first night. She acknowledged the harm she'd caused and expressed gratitude that I was a good father to Ethan. Max, to his credit, didn't try to justify anything. He simply said he was committed to being there for both children in whatever capacity I was comfortable with. We agreed to slowly increase Ethan's time with them, allowing him to bond with his sister. It was the mature, adult thing to do, even though part of me still carried resentment. The revenge I'd enacted, the public exposure, the divorce terms, the custody arrangement, had been satisfying in the moment. It had been the nuclear option that people on Reddit forums always talked about. But in the long term, what mattered more was that I'd rebuilt my life successfully. The financial moves I'd made with the cryptocurrency proved prescient. The market continued to surge and my investments grew even more. I was financially secure in ways I never had been during my marriage. The studio was profitable, and I even started angel investing in other startups, including, ironically, a tech company that competed with Max's old business. Ethan started kindergarten, excelling in school and making friends easily. He showed an interest in art and technology, and I encouraged both. We had a good life, just the two of us, with Emily becoming an increasingly important part of our world. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never discovered the truth. If Roxana had successfully passed off Max's child as mine, if the affair had continued in secret for years, would I have eventually found out? Would she have ever confessed? Or would I have lived in ignorant contentment, raising another man's child while my wife maintained her double life? The unknowing might have been easier in some ways, but I don't regret finding out. The truth, however painful, allowed me to make informed choices about my life. It gave me agency when I was otherwise powerless. The story I've told, from discovery to revenge to rebuilding, isn't unique. Forums and support groups are full of similar tales. But each one is uniquely devastating to the person living through it. The betrayal isn't just about the physical act or even the emotional affair. It's about the lying, the gaslighting, the theft of time and trust. My revenge was successful by any measure. I exposed the truth, protected my assets, secured custody of my son, and emerged financially and emotionally stronger. The pro-revenge and nuclear revenge communities would approve. But revenge, I learned, is ultimately unsatisfying. It doesn't undo the hurt or restore what was lost. What actually healed me was time, therapy, and building something new. The studio, my relationship with Emily, watching Ethan grow and thrive, these things brought more satisfaction than any revenge ever could. Today, nearly 3 years after that confrontation dinner, life is good. The wound has scarred over, no longer raw but still visible. I'm not the same person I was in that marriage. I'm more cautious, more aware, more protective of my heart. But I'm also stronger, more independent, more sure of myself. Roxana and Max did eventually marry, a small ceremony in their new town. Ethan attended as a guest, and while it was strange to see photos of my son at his mother's wedding to her affair partner, I accepted it as part of our complicated reality. The business continues to grow. We landed a major contract with a national brand, and I'm considering opening a third office in New York. Emily and I moved in together last month, merging our households and our lives. Ethan adores her and she's wonderful with him. Last week I was cleaning out some old files and came across the original drone footage from that first night at the camping site. I watched it once, feeling a distant echo of the pain and rage I'd felt then. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd found out, grateful for how things had turned out, grateful for the life I'd built from the ashes of my marriage. I deleted the files. I didn't need them anymore. The divorce was final, custody was established, and keeping them served no purpose except to remind me of the worst period of my life. It was time to let go completely. That evening, I sat on the balcony of the new house Emily and I now share, different from the apartment where so much drama had unfolded. Ethan was asleep inside and Emily was reading beside me. The Boston skyline glittered in the distance, full of promise and possibility. I thought about Roxana and Max, probably putting their daughter to bed in their suburban home. I thought about all the twists and turns that had brought us all to this moment. And I realized something important. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's not even succeeding despite them. The best revenge is building a life so good that you forget you were ever interested in revenge at all. My story is one of betrayal discovered, revenge enacted, and ultimately healing achieved. It's about using technology and determination to uncover truth, about protecting yourself legally and financially, and about having the courage to start over when everything falls apart. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, document everything, protect your assets, consult professionals, and remember that while revenge might feel good temporarily, building your new life is what ultimately matters. The pain will fade, the anger will subside, and one day you'll wake up and realize you're happy again. It won't happen overnight. It took me 3 years and countless hours of therapy and self-work. But it happened. And the life I have now, though completely different from what I envisioned when I married Roxana, is authentic, fulfilling, and mine. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.